You're 27 years old, 5 months pregnant, and planning your February wedding. Your life is unfolding exactly as you dreamed. You've got the career you love, the man you want to marry, and a baby boy growing inside you. Everything feels perfect, safe, secure. But what happens when you pull into your garage after work on a Tuesday evening, following the same routine you've done hundreds of times before? What happens when someone is waiting in the darkness? Someone who believes that if they can't have the life they want, then you can't have yours either? This is what happened to Avis Banks on November 29, 2006.
Avis Banks was my sister. Avis and I were very close. She was like my best friend.
Avis was my first cousin because it was about 6 grandkids and they were all girls. We all grew up together doing the same thing, going the same places.
She always wanted to work with children. So she made it up in her mind after she graduated from high school that she was gonna go on to college and get her degree in child development, which she did.
It was a huge accomplishment for Avis to graduate from college. My grandmother was extremely proud because she always wanted to go to college but never got the opportunity.
My dad would tell us nobody would ever be perfect enough for my girls. She was the perfect sister. I know you can't call anybody perfect, but to me, she was perfect.
What should have been just another ordinary evening became the night that exposed a web of lies, obsession, and deadly jealousy that no one saw coming. But before we dive into that horrific night, let me tell you about the woman whose life was stolen before it truly began. Avis Marie Banks entered this world on August 18, 1979, in Vicksburg, Mississippi. She was the middle daughter in a tight-knit family of 3 girls, raised by Frederick and Deborah Banks. While her sisters might have been the louder ones, Avis carried herself with a quiet confidence that drew people in. She wasn't the type to demand attention. She earned it through her actions. Education was everything to Avis. After graduating from Warren Central High School in 1997, she pushed forward to Hines Community College, where she didn't just attend classes, she dominated them. Graduating at the top of her class wasn't just a personal victory, it was a family celebration. But Avis wasn't done yet. At Alcorn State University, she earned her bachelor's degree in 2001, becoming the first person in her family to graduate from college. Think about that for a moment. The weight of being the trailblazer, the one who opens doors for everyone who comes after. That was Avis Banks. Her calling in life was crystal clear, working with children. At Bright Horizons Daycare in Jackson, Mississippi, she wasn't just another employee. Colleagues remember her as someone who genuinely loved what she did, who brought warmth and nurturing to every child she encountered. Her faith anchored her at Locust Grove Missionary Baptist Church, where she found community and strength.
She would always talk about wanting to open up her own daycare and wanting to make a difference in a lot of children's lives.
In 2004, everything changed when she walked into a gym and met Keyon Pittman. Keyon was everything Avis wasn't. Outgoing, where she was reserved, talkative, where she was thoughtful, larger than life, where she was quietly confident. He taught and coached basketball at a middle school, sharing Avis's passion for working with young people. On paper, they seemed like opposites, but sometimes opposites create the perfect balance. Their relationship moved with the speed of people who knew what they wanted. By 2006, they were living together in Ridgeland, planning a February 2007 wedding and expecting their first child, a baby boy. Avis was glowing with happiness, talking constantly about nursery preparations and baby names. Her family welcomed Keyon with open arms. He seemed respectful, well-spoken, and most importantly, he treated their daughter with love and care. Or so they believed. But here's what nobody knew, what Avis herself didn't know. While she was planning their future together, Keyon was living a double life. Starting in August 2006, he had begun a sexual affair with Carla Hughes, a fellow teacher at Chastain Middle School where he worked. Carla Ann Hughes was born on June 12, 1981, making her 25 years old at the time. Like Keyon, she was an educator, but unlike Avis, she was single and seemingly available. What started as workplace friendship had evolved into something far more dangerous. While Avis was choosing wedding flowers and setting up the nursery, Keyon was sneaking away to meet Carla. He would lie to his pregnant fiancée, telling her he was going somewhere else entirely while he spent weekends with another woman. In his mind, this was just a casual fling, meaningless physical attraction with no emotional strings attached. But Carla saw things very differently. She introduced Keyon to her parents. She told people he was going to be her future husband. She even claimed to be pregnant, though that turned out to be false. In her mind, this wasn't an affair. This was her relationship, and Avis was the obstacle standing in the way of her happiness. The warning signs were everywhere, but Keyon ignored them all. Carla's behavior became increasingly obsessive and erratic. She threatened to confront Avis directly, actually getting in her car and driving toward the home Keyon shared with his pregnant fiancée. Keyon had to call and warn her away, but even then, he didn't end the affair. Just days before Avis's murder, over the Thanksgiving weekend of 2006, Carla made one final desperate play. She rented a hotel room and asked Keyon to meet her there. He left Avis at his mother's house and went to see Carla at a restaurant instead. When he refused to spend the night with her, they argued, and the meeting ended badly. But still, he didn't cut ties completely. November 29, 2006, started like any other Tuesday for Avis Banks. She went to work at the daycare she loved, caring for children while her own child grew inside her. That evening, Keyon was at basketball practice at Chastain Middle School, the same school where his secret lover also worked. At 5:36 p.m., Keyon called Avis while she was driving home. It was their last conversation. She told him she was almost there, probably mentioned something about dinner or their evening plans. The call ended, and Avis continued toward what should have been the safety of home. But someone else knew her routine. Someone else knew exactly when she'd be pulling into that garage, alone and vulnerable. Avis arrived at their Ridgeland home sometime between 5:50 and 6 p.m. She parked her car in the garage, probably gathering her purse and thinking about the quiet evening ahead. She had no idea that death was waiting for her in the shadows. What happened next was brutal and personal. Avis was shot 4 times, in the leg, chest, and head, and then stabbed multiple times in the face and neck as she lay dying. The violence didn't stop when she fell. Even as she lay helpless, her attacker continued the assault with a knife, slashing and stabbing in a frenzy that spoke of rage, jealousy, and pure hatred. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This wasn't a random act of violence. This was personal, intimate, and calculated. When Keyon arrived home around 8:30 p.m., he opened the garage door to find the woman he was supposed to marry lying in a pool of blood. He tried to wake her, ran through the house calling out to see if anyone was still there, then rushed to a neighbor's home to call for help. Police arrived just before 8:45 p.m. to find Keyon cradling Avis's lifeless body. Officers had to order him to step away so they could secure the scene, but it was already too late. Avis and her unborn son, the baby boy they were going to name, were both gone. The crime scene told a story of forced entry and deliberate violence. The back door had been kicked in, leaving clear shoe prints on the glass. Inside the garage, investigators found a bullet hole in the lower corner of the door, blood smears on the walls and light switch, and the door connecting the garage to the house standing wide open with the drywall dented from the force of impact. Yet nothing had been stolen. Avis's purse sat untouched. Valuables remained in plain sight. This wasn't about money or robbery. This was about elimination. Naturally, investigators' first focus was Keyon Pittman. In cases like this, the husband or boyfriend is always the primary suspect.
In an investigation, you want to start with the person that's closest and work your way out. In this case, the murder of Avis Banks, her fiancé. Keyon was the closest person that we were looking at. He was transported from the house to the police department.
They photographed his blood-stained clothes, tested his hands for gunshot residue, and scrutinized every detail of his story. A single particle of gunshot residue was found on each of his hands, but experts later testified this could have been transferred when he touched Avis's body after discovering her. More importantly, his alibi checked out completely. Multiple witnesses at Chastain Middle School confirmed he'd been present for the entire duration of basketball practice during the time window when Avis was murdered. His phone records supported his story too, showing no activity near their home at the time of the killing. But then, something strange happened. After initially cooperating with police, answering questions and submitting to testing, Keyon suddenly lawyered up and refused to speak with investigators anymore. This shift raised red flags. Why would someone with a solid alibi suddenly stop talking? What was he afraid they might discover? The answer came when detectives began interviewing Keyon's co-workers at Chastain Middle School. Several staff members revealed that Keyon had been involved with multiple women, including another teacher at the school. Her name was Carla Hughes. When police first approached Carla on December 1, 2006, she claimed she and Keyon were just friends. But later that same evening, during a formal interview at the police station, she changed her story. She admitted to having a sexual relationship with Keyon, but denied any involvement in the murder. When asked if she owned a gun or had access to one, she said no. But investigators sensed she wasn't telling them everything. 2 days after Avis and her unborn son were laid to rest, police received a phone call that would crack the case wide open. A local attorney contacted them, saying he had information about the possible murder weapon and a client who was ready to talk. That client was Patrick Nash, Carla Hughes's cousin. Nash told investigators a story that painted a chilling picture of premeditation. Just days before the murder, Carla had come to him asking to borrow a weapon. She claimed there had been attempted break-ins at her home and she needed protection. Wanting to help his cousin, Nash loaned her a Rossi .38 caliber revolver loaded with 5 bullets, along with a folding hunting knife. He even showed her how to use the gun. But here's where the story takes a dark turn. On December 1st, the same day Carla was first interviewed by police, she returned the gun to Nash. All 5 bullets were gone. The knife was never returned. Even more disturbing was a phone call Nash had received on the night of the murder. Carla had casually mentioned that someone had killed Keyon's girlfriend. How did she know so quickly? And why had she called him specifically? When confronted directly by his uncle James, Carla couldn't give a straight answer about whether the borrowed gun had been used in Avis's murder. Instead, she looked down and shrugged her shoulders. Not exactly a denial, but not an admission either. On December 5, 2006, Patrick Nash turned the gun over to police. The next day, Carla Hughes was arrested and charged as an accessory after the fact. But investigators weren't done building their case. On December 8th, they executed a search warrant on Carla's home, armed with a crucial piece of evidence: a photograph of the shoe print impression found at the crime scene. Inside Carla's house, they discovered 3 key pieces of evidence that would seal her fate. First, they found a pair of women's size 10 tread-safe shoes. The tread pattern on the soles closely matched the prints left on the glass door at the Banks Pittman home. Second, they found a photograph of Keyon tucked away in her nightstand, evidence of her emotional obsession with him. Third, they recovered a handwritten note or poem marked with the initials KP. The physical evidence was sent to the Mississippi Crime Lab for testing, and the results were devastating for Carla's defense. The tread pattern on her shoes matched the crime scene prints. The ballistics testing confirmed that the bullets recovered from Avis's body had been fired from the exact gun Carla had borrowed from her cousin. But perhaps the most damning evidence was her cell phone records. These records placed her near the Banks Pittman home at the time of the murder. At 5:37 p.m., she answered a call that connected to a cell tower on Lake Harbor Drive in Ridgeland, a tower with a 2-mile coverage radius that included the victim's home. She stayed connected to that tower until the call ended. Then, at 6:04 p.m., she made another call from the same coverage area. But just 3 minutes later, at 6:07 p.m., her phone connected to a different tower outside the range. The timing was everything. Avis had arrived home around 5:50 p.m. The murder occurred shortly afterward, and Carla's phone data placed her in the exact location at the exact time. On December 8, 2006, police upgraded the charges against Carla Hughes to 2 counts of capital murder, one for Avis Banks and one for her unborn son. After 8 hours of deliberation on October 13, 2009, the jury found Hughes guilty on both counts of capital murder. During the trial, the full scope of Carla's obsession was revealed. Keyon testified about her increasingly erratic behavior, her threats to confront Avis, her false pregnancy claims, and her refusal to accept that their affair was meaningless to him. Prosecutors painted a picture of a woman so consumed with jealousy that she was willing to commit the ultimate crime to eliminate her perceived rival. Although Hughes could have faced the death penalty, she was instead sentenced to serve 2 consecutive life sentences without parole. Carla Hughes never testified in her own defense. Her attorneys tried to shift blame back to Keyon, suggesting he might have used her shoes and claiming he'd once had a key to her home. They even brought in a witness who claimed Keyon wasn't inside the gym for the full duration of basketball practice, potentially casting doubt on his alibi. But that same witness had previously told police the opposite, undermining his credibility. Police testified that Hughes's fingerprints were not found at the home, and investigators believed the killer wore gloves. Despite the defense's efforts to create reasonable doubt, the evidence against Carla was overwhelming. The jury saw through the desperate attempts to implicate Keyon. They understood that while he may have been unfaithful, he wasn't a murderer. The real killer was the woman who had become so obsessed with him that she was willing to destroy 2 innocent lives to get what she wanted. Today, Carla Hughes is housed at the Central Mississippi Correctional Institution, where she continues to maintain her innocence. In 2012, she appealed her conviction to the Mississippi Supreme Court, arguing there were no witnesses linking her to the shooting and no evidence she fired the murder weapon. The Supreme Court upheld her conviction, finding that prosecutors had established clear motive, means, and opportunity. For Avis Banks's family, no verdict could truly bring justice. Their daughter, sister, and soon-to-be mother was gone forever, along with the grandson they would never meet. The quiet, confident woman who had been the first in her family to graduate from college, who had dedicated her life to caring for children, who was just 2 months away from her wedding day, her story had been cut brutally short by someone she barely knew existed. This case serves as a chilling reminder of how dangerous obsession can become when it's allowed to fester in secret. As we remember Avis Banks, we remember not just the victim of a senseless crime, but a young woman full of promise whose legacy lives on in the lives she touched, and the family who will never stop loving her. Her story reminds us that behind every true crime case is a real person whose dreams were stolen,